Hello, yoga teachers who both root and rise. Root to Rise is the intersection between self-inquiry, rooting, and teaching extraordinary yoga classes, rising. Welcome. My name is Sherry Fisher. I'm one of the founders of Root to Rise. The Root to Rise yoga teaching method bridges the gap between your yoga teacher training and teaching extraordinary yoga classes, no matter how much experience you have. So if you're a yoga teacher and you have something to share or you have something to learn that will help you become a better, more confident yoga teacher, you're in the right place, and I'm glad you're here. So one of the reasons that we do these interviews is to help bring you information to make teaching easier. We want to help you take a basic yoga class and make it extraordinary and do it in a really easy way. So I bring to you guests who have a lot of teaching experience so that they can help you with this. A couple of the things that I think are really important for us to teach and demonstrate to our students is, one, how to be present, how to find mindfulness, and two, which is related to presence, reduce their stress levels. And we've seen people come in and out of our yoga classes where they come in really stressed and tense, and they leave and they've got that yoga bliss going on. And it's no surprise that that happens, but I do think it's important for us to understand a little bit more about that and how we can bring that into our students. So today's guest is Kim Dastrup, and she has been teaching since 2003. That's 18 years of teaching. I've gone to several of her classes, and she is an extraordinary yoga teacher. She's also an instructor of mindfulness-based stress reduction. So she is going to be my guest today, and we're going to be talking about how you as a yoga teacher can practice mindfulness and also bring it into your students. Welcome, Kim. I am so happy to have you here today and to be able to talk to us about how to teach better yoga. So let's start with mindfulness. Let's start by just talking about what is mindfulness.
Yes, thank you so much for having me today, Sherry. I am looking forward to this conversation. So mindfulness it's thrown out a lot these days. We hear this word a lot, but essentially mindfulness is the act of paying attention and paying attention in a very deliberate way. The founder of MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction that you've mentioned, his name's Jon Kabat-Zinn, and a lot of teachers might have heard of him before, but he essentially defines mindfulness as the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and without judgment to the unfolding of experience. I know that's like a mouthful, but I think sometimes it can seem really inaccessible, but it's just simply paying attention to the moment that you're in as it is happening, and doing so without judgment. And I think that's the hardest piece for most of us, because there's a part of our psyche, a part of our mind that likes to comment on everything, evaluate everything, say if something's good or bad or preferable or not. And in essence, the mindfulness practice is to step into the observer only and noticing what's happening without that critic. If that makes sense.
That makes complete sense. And I think there are some key words in that definition that you were talking about. So it's about the presence. It's about non-judgment. It's doing it on purpose. And and we talk about this in yoga, it's that pause. And I even sometimes in my yoga classes say, I just need to catch up with myself. Because I think in our society, we do get to going really quickly. We've got a lot of things going on, multitasking. We've got devices that can, get our attention and all of that. And so the mindfulness part is all of those pieces as the experience is unfolding. And what's interesting to me as a yoga teacher is we invite people into an environment that welcomes that in. And to be even more intentional about it as yoga teachers, I think, is where we can really step it up. So take the beauty of the practice, but add a little bit more to it. Mm-hmm. What else about mindfulness? Like when you were taking your training, what were some of the things that you learned about mindfulness, and like when we can do it and when we're most, efficient with it? What did you learn about that?
Yeah, I can speak about that. Well, mindfulness has its roots in Buddhism, as probably most people know. And the discipline that I've been studying, MBSR, um, mindfulness based stress reduction, just to clarify. Um, Basically, the developer, John Kabat-Zinn, he developed this in the 70s. And he was a Buddhist practitioner, but he was working at a stress clinic at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. And he realized that these principles could be very helpful in helping people manage their crazy lives and their busyness, or even some mental illness and some things that have come up in these clients of his. And so it's a more secular approach to mindfulness in an effort to reach a broader audience and to make it a little bit more accessible. And I think the most important thing about this particular discipline is that it's science and evidence based. There's been a lot of science done around mindfulness and how it can actually change the chemistry of your brain, how it can help you improve your sleep habits, how it can certainly help with stress and anxiety. But I would say, this is just Kim Dastrup's approach, I would say that the golden nugget of mindfulness practice has to do with contentment and satisfaction in our lives. And, as many of us know, this is one of the niyamas. Santosha is contentment beyond conditions. So, in essence, we practice mindfulness not to create perfect conditions around us or to get more of what we want or get rid of what we don't want, but it actually gives us the wherewithal to pause, to be in our life exactly as it is. And so we're not constantly trying to push stuff away that we don't want or chase after the stuff that we do, because as we know, life is going to happen, that we're in the storm. And so is there a way for us to ride that wave with a little more grace and more ease? And so to me, that's why I practice mindfulness, is to find that deeper sort of contentment that's not dependent on what's happening to me in my life.
And I really like what you said too about being with what is and that santosha, that contentment. Byron Katie, in her book Loving What Is, she talks about the source of suffering is wanting things to be different than they are. And so that contentment is what you're saying is whatever's appearing in front of you, finding peace with that, being with it just as it is and not needing to change it or judge it or want something different. It's just sort of like, look what's here right now. And I think I think that's something too that we can emphasize to our students. If let's say we themed a class around one of the niyamas, santosha, and we said, how does that come into this particular moment? And we talk about this in our book, Standing Room Only, How to Be That Yoga Teacher. The second pillar of powerful teaching is character. And that's how we take a basic yoga class and we boost it so that it's more of a yoga experience. So weaving in a theme builds that character. Weaving in the theme of one of the yamas or niyamas, but also the mindfulness. We can weave that in as well. I love that, Kim. And these are the kinds of tips that we want to give to yoga teachers to make it easier. If you took just that little nugget out right now and used it in the next class that you taught, there's your theme. There you go. So Kim, talk to me too. I'm sure that they went through a lot of the health benefits or the different benefits. Like, why is mindfulness so important than just, I think a lot of us live on autopilot and that's been our survival mechanism, but why rein it in and come back to this place of mindfulness?
It's interesting. There was a study that was done many years ago out of Harvard, and it was a huge sample size, and they studied all ages, cultures, genders, and they were studying the wandering mind. And they were trying to figure out how much of our waking hours our mind is wandering, just as it like across the board. And do you want to venture a guess, Sherry?
Yeah, this right on the spot.
Hours? Not to put you on the spot.
I would guess in the 90s or high 90s.
That's That's high. It's not quite that high, but it's high. It's around 50%.
Oh, maybe
But
I was talking just for me.
yeah, me too. I but it's when you think about that as a general rule, as a human race, our waking hours, our minds are wandering half the time, which means we're not present. We're not actually here, focused on the present moment experience. But this is the other thing that they found in this study is that when the mind is wandering, it's tending to go negative. It's the worry, it's the what ifs, it's the lamenting what just happened. Oh, I should have, could have, would have done that. Or what if this happens 10 minutes from now? And so when the mind is wandering, it's spiraling downward for the most part. And so when we can learn how to train the mind to be present, and it takes practice, it's just like going to the gym and working a muscle. When we learn how to train the mind to be present, we're literally creating new neural pathways in our brain. So the PCC network, I think is what it's called, the part of our brain that lights up with the mind's wandering, that decreases. And we tend to worry less, to stress less, to spiral less, and to go down the rabbit hole. And so in MBSR, we talk a lot about how it's really important to have an anchor into our present moment experience. Because the mind's going to wander. I mean, the mind generates thought. That's what it does. So it's not about emptying the mind or trying to not have thoughts, because that's not reasonable. That's not possible for us. But to be a little bit more aware of the thoughts when they do arise, and when we notice the mind is wandering, to gently and with compassion, with kindness, with gentleness, bring it back to our present moment. And so the breath is probably the most common anchor, even in yoga, right? Yoga, our physical body for sure is an anchor, but the breath we talk about a lot in yoga practice. And so whenever we bring our attention back to the breath, we are building that muscle of concentration and focusing on what's happening now. But there are also other anchors that you can use, such as sound. What's coming in through the sense of sound, through your ears. Maybe a soft gaze or looking at an object, that can be an anchor. Or physical sensations in the body. Maybe when you're sitting on a chair, on a cushion, or feeling your feet on the ground. We've probably all had that moment where we just feel, okay, I'm right here, right now. And just feeling whatever sensations are coming up. And so it almost doesn't matter what the anchor is, because it's a little bit different for everyone. But just so there is something for the mind to bring the attention back to when it wanders. So.
Well, in my master's program, I studied mindfulness meditation. And one of the best things for me was I thought meditation was the ability to sit with a blank mind and be very calm. And I'm thinking that's just not going to happen for me. And that's why I pushed back on a meditation practice, because I thought I'm just really not going to be good at this. Mm-hmm. So the mindfulness part of it was really just noticing what is. So noticing if a thought were to pop up and say, ooh, there's a thought. That's interesting. Thought, go back to the breath, go back to the breath. And so for you yoga teachers, for the viewers out there, I guess this is an invitation for you to look a little deeper into mindfulness, because if you also have that resistance because you think, oh, I can't get my mind blank, this isn't like that at all. It's noticing your thoughts, it's noticing your breath, it's noticing sounds around you, it's being with what is. And that is really the practice of mindfulness. And then just like you said, Kim, it's something that we can tune into anytime. In fact, the viewers now, if you just for a few breaths, think about the breath and how it's expanding your body, or feel yourself sitting on your chair, all of that is the simple practice of mindfulness. So it's easier than you think, even though it's still challenging. So So Kim, let me ask you this. I just threw out a little bit of an example of how to practice mindfulness, but I'm guessing you may have a couple of ideas of how we could share with our viewers, with the yoga teachers, how to practice it themselves. And then once they've done it, maybe this is something too that we could weave into the class to give it that character that we were just talking about, so that we are helping our students practice it and maybe take that practice with them.
Yes, for sure. And just to, I think it's important to mention that there are formal practices where we deliberately set aside time to practice things like sitting meditation or even yoga, body scan, and walking meditation. And then there's also informal practice where we bring that essence of mindful awareness into all that we do, whether it's eating or engaging in a conversation or writing, any of those activities that we do day to day. So I'd love to share with you just a couple of pretty simple mindfulness exercises that yoga teachers can teach their students or incorporate into a yoga class. And one of my favorites is very simple. It is called the There Is practice. And this is essentially something that you could do at the beginning of a practice with your students before you start the movement. And you are moving into the role of observer. And so you essentially use the sentence, there is, as a prelude to anything and everything that comes into your field of awareness without judgment. So imagine, sitting in a chair on a cushion, and you might repeat in your mind, there is the sound of Kim's voice. And then let that go. There is the sound of a car going by. And let that go. There is sensation in my left knee. Instead of, I have pain in my knee. Oh my gosh, I'm getting old. Oh my gosh, I need to go to the doctor. I think I need a knee replacement. You see how quickly we kind of rabbit hole. So essentially the exercise is noticing, and there's nothing right or wrong to be aware of. It's just information. But you note that and then do your best to let that go without the critic or the commentary, if you will.
And that what came to mind for me was no story around it. It just is.
Yes.
There is a pain in my knee. There is the sound of a car. And all of those things, I think and maybe it's something that we learned in school, is to build a story around something. Like, how does it compare to something else? Is it hotter? Is it colder? It just is. And that's that without judgment piece that you were talking about. So as a yoga teacher, then I imagine you welcoming your students to the class, giving them your introductions. And then as you step into the theme, give them almost what you just said, just some simple directions. There is, maybe give them 30 seconds or so to practice it, and then come back and maybe even weave it in throughout the class as they're in a certain posture and say, notice here, there is what, and just kind of lay it out there.
I love that. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think the other piece I forgot to mention is that we take any personal pronouns out of the sentence, right? So it's not I feel or mine or you or there. It's
there is.
There is. It just is. So yeah, I love that. Thank you.
So that you said you had a couple of examples.
Yeah.
So what would your other example, a simple example that our yoga teachers could do themselves and then share with their students?
Yeah, so this one is called the stop exercise. This is another one that you could do at the beginning or even during a class, and it's a fancy little acronym. But so the S is for stop. So instructing your students to just stop and notice what it feels like to stop moving and to stop doing, to stop striving, to stop seeking. Okay, and then the T stands for take a breath. So gently feel the presence of your breath. the inhale, the exhale, the quality. And then the O is for observe, observing thoughts, emotions, sensations, and doing so without judgment, without story, without personal pronouns, just the experience you're having now. Nothing more, nothing less. And then the last is proceed. And so can you step back into all that you do with greater mindfulness and awareness? And noticing that when we take the time to stop, it's up to you to how to step back in, what quality. So with this broader lens of awareness, you now have a choice. And they teach this principle a lot in MBSR and other mindfulness, that there's between stimulus and response, there is a space. And when we recognize that we can broaden that space a little bit and actually give ourselves a choice between stimulus and response, we tend to be a little less reactionary, a little less, quick to judge or quick to assess, and just, again, step into that role of observer. So I like the stop exercise because it's pretty easy to remember. It's very simple. You can do it in 5 minutes, and it can have a pretty remarkable effect. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so as a yoga teacher, would you, if you're in the midst of, you maybe introduce it in the beginning, and would you then prompt them and you'd say, we're going to stop, and that's like the S. And I invite you to take a deep breath in. So you're sort of guiding them through, observe what's happening for the next several breaths, just be. Mm-hmm. And then let them breathe in, out, and then let's proceed and just give them the next cue.
Yes. And you wouldn't even have to teach it as an acronym. I mean, it could just be for you to remember, but you wouldn't have to teach them that. Just exactly how you said it. And I'm sure you've done this as a teacher without knowing that you've done this, like after some movement, let's pause in mountain pose and like, what's going on here? Let's check it out. I think it's a pretty intuitive thing to do in a yoga class. So.
But what a great way to frame it for us as the yoga teacher is just it's systematic, and we can then cue them through it, and several times throughout the practice we could do it, which I think is great. It weaves it back in.
So. Yeah, absolutely.
So is there anything else about mindfulness-based stress reduction or any of the practices that you have, or any information that you would like to share with us? Anything additional?
Oh gosh. Well, I did want to mention too, there's a really great formal practice that we do in MBSR called the body scan. And it's a very accessible, for most people, a very accessible way to kind of do a mindful scan of the body and just notice any sensations or energy or temperature, anything that's going on in different areas of the body. And I think there's no movement involved. There's no, you don't have to sit in full lotus position. You can just recline. In fact, you could even do a version of this in Savasana as a yoga instructor, where you essentially call attention to different areas of the body. And typically in MBSR, we start with the feet, the toes, and move up the legs. And you can go as slowly as you'd like. There are some body scan meditations that are like 45 minutes long. But of course you wouldn't have to take that long. But I think in Savasana, especially, if you're a newer student, your mind tends to be all over the place, right? So this is a nice way to keep the mind a little bit focused and contained for your students as they're resting in Savasana. So that would be another way to bring kind of a formal mindfulness practice into a yoga class.
I like that too, because it's like a guided meditation. You get them into Savasana, and then you can start at the toes, And when I've done body scans, it's notice your first toe, your second toe, and
Yep.
and you instruct them, you don't need to move the body parts. I'm just directing your attention there. And it's
Right.
amazing when I'm doing that kind of practice is how relaxed I can feel and how I can separate out the different body parts and then almost feel like your whole right leg is very
Yes.
relaxed and then moving that up your body. And so I think in a Savasana, that would be such a wonderful way to seal up the practice.
Hmm. Absolutely. And just being very, very explicit that there's nothing right or wrong to notice, even if it's discomfort, right? Even if it's not our preference, and to talk about that component too, that you don't have to feel relaxed. You might, by doing this practice, but I think it's important to give students permission to feel whatever they're feeling without the judgment.
Without
So,
judgment. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with all of this information that Kim and I are sharing with you, we have put together a handout that you can download free. And it's just a tip sheet that Kim and I work together on to put together some of these tips, some of this information so that you can take it with you. And remember, you can always come back to Root to Rise Yogis, this Facebook page, and you can watch this interview again and take even some of Kim's exact words to share it with your yoga students. So please make full use of the resources that we have. Kim, if there is a way that people could get in touch with you, on the handout we have your contact information, but what are some of the ways that they can either learn from you yoga or mindfulness-based stress reduction or get more information?
yeah, thank you so much. So I do have a website, kimdastrupyoga.com. I lead yoga mindfulness retreats. Haven't for a while, considering our current conditions, but I hope to do so next year. I have a retreat in Ireland planned for June of 2022, in Thailand in March. We'll see if that happens. And then I teach an MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction course through Westminster College, their community ed program. I'm starting one this next week, but we'll be offering another one. It's an 8-week course, and we'll be offering another one in the winter. And then I do, it's hard. Yoga is hard right now. I do some Zoom classes, I do some Facebook Lives, but all of the information should be on my website, or you can email me as well, and you should have my contact information for that.
All right, Kim, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing all of this knowledge. And I think what's been so helpful is the way that you bring in the information about mindfulness and your knowledge and experience with that, but you have brought it in through the lens of a yoga teacher. And so it is so helpful for us as yoga teachers to hear from people like you because you have that experience and you have so many good tips for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, back to me now. And you know what that means? It's time for your coaching challenge. I'm sure there are a lot of different takeaways that you could use that Kim shared with you today. And one of them might be a couple of the exercises that she talked about, you doing them yourself, but also sharing them very simply in the classes that you teach. So she talked about there is, and that was the exercise of noticing and observing and being with what is, and maybe even weaving that together with the contentment piece that she talked about, the santosha. The second one was stop, and that was the stop and to take a breath, that pause and observe and then proceed. And maybe you could do that yourself, but also share that with your students, whether you give it the acronym or not. And then the last one was the body scan, and that is during Savasana. And it's just directing their attention through different parts of the body, using the breath, relaxing. So maybe that's something that you could do yourself. There are some recorded body scan meditations that you can find, but then also just guiding your students through that. So I would challenge you to choose one of those that resonates with you, try it yourself, and then also take it to your yoga students this week, the very next class you teach, and see if you can share with them the gift of mindfulness and stress reduction. That's it for this series of interviews with Kim Dastrup. And we bring this to you as yoga teachers to help boost your knowledge, which also helps boost your confidence levels and helps you to feel more confident and more relaxed as you teach your yoga classes. If you'd like to get your hands on the book Standing Room Only: How to Be That Yoga Teacher, the link will be included here with the video, so you can click over to that and check it out. And I hope you will, because in there we talk about the 5 pillars of powerful teaching, and that is communication, character, connection, commitment, and consideration. And we've talked about that throughout these interviews, and there are the 5 pillars that help make you that powerful and more confident yoga teacher. So I hope you'll check it out. That's it for now. I hope to see you in our Facebook group, the Yoga Teacher Gathering Space, where we talk about all things yoga and we root and rise together in our quest to become better, more knowledgeable, more confident yoga teachers. We'll see you soon.